Hey everybody, Andy Duffey here, talking to you again, bringing another daily devotional from the same location where I was last night, by our upstairs window, looking out longingly into the sunshine. Of course, we did get out to go for a walk, so that was good. I hope everyone's getting outside and getting some sunshine and enjoying the nice weather. Even if we can't be with one another, we can still go outside and enjoy the world that God has given us. One of the reasons I'm back here again today is because I'm talking about something similar. We're talking about distance this week, this Holy Week, as we wait for Easter, as we imagine what it was like with the disciples on that Saturday as they waited for Christ to come again. Of course, many of them may or may not have believed that that was going to happen. Hard to say. But for today, I wanted to talk less about physical space and more about temporal space, temporal distance, time. I have a handy clock with me. I used to really hate clocks. I used to, kind of the way that some folks talk about time as like a great slave driver, right? We're all bound to time. We can't do the things that we want to do because we got to fit it into somebody else's prescribed schedule or timepiece. We're always looking at the clock to see if we're late or if we're early. When I was little, and let's say I was on timeout for 5 minutes, that 5 minutes took forever. And there were other times when I remember, my parents would say, "Oh, so and so's coming over at 5 o'clock," and say it was 4:30, and I thought that half hour was days, weeks long. And I would stare off into space and say, "Okay, I'm going to think about something else to take my mind off of waiting." And by the time I thought a good hour had gone by, I'd look at the clock and it'd be 30 seconds later. It was terrible. Now, I don't really get bored like I used to. Some of you probably somewhat bored since you're stuck at home and whatnot. But I can appreciate that. There's also another sense we're all kind of waiting for some good news to be released from this this quarantine bondage, we might say. I'm reminded that God's timing is beyond our understanding. And sometimes we demand that God work on our schedule. We would say, "God, you need to be, you need to take orders from us. We know when things ought to happen." Of course, we usually think of them from our own selfish perspective, right? As if we're the only factors involved. I wanted to read for you a story from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, about Jesus. It says, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' When he heard this, Jesus said, 'This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, 'Let us go back to Judea.'" I'm going to pause. Jesus loved Lazarus, Mary, Martha. So he decided not to go to them and to stay where he was instead. That sounds a little bit like contrary to how we might think, right? Oh, someone's in need. Go to them. Visit. Contact, right? We want to support. Jesus does the opposite. Because Jesus loved them, he stayed away from them. Kind of like what we're doing, right? We're not supposed to be out around people. We show our love by staying away. Sometimes there's a time for that. Now, I want to skip ahead a little bit, because eventually Jesus does decide to go, and there's lots of fascinating things that happen in this chapter. As they were on their way, he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Mary and Martha to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." And a little bit later, Martha calls her sister Mary in. And it says, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." So both sisters end up asking Jesus that. And of course, later in the chapter, Jesus goes to the tomb, raises Lazarus back to life. It's one of the most extraordinary miracles Jesus performs. And it only appears in the Gospel of John. But what I think is fascinating is time made no difference. Yesterday we talked about how distance, physical distance, didn't make a difference for Jesus' healing power, right? He could heal people without touching them, without seeing them, without even knowing them, as we might. In this sense, it doesn't matter whether Jesus comes to us at once, or whether Jesus comes to us 2 days later, 2 weeks later, 2 years, 2 decades. Jesus' healing power comes, and it is just as effective whether it's now or later. Jesus has good news waiting for each one of us. Sometimes Jesus chooses to wait, and we might wonder why. Maybe there's some testing involved. Maybe there are other factors at work. Maybe it's simply because when it does happen, we will be ready to really appreciate how amazing it is. I don't know. But what I have faith in is that time doesn't make a difference to God's love. And God's power will come when it is truly time. And we will all be set free from whatever it is that oppresses us. Whether it is sickness, whether it is sin, whether it's a time of depression or anxiety, whether it's just a string of bad news, grief, whether it's deeper social injustice, or death itself. In God's time, there will be resurrection. I hope that you are seeing the signs of new life all around this beautiful opening up of spring. I'm going to enjoy it a little bit more today, and I'll see you all tomorrow.